Welcome, everyone, to episode 000 of the Cold Steel Podcast. I'm your host, Muss, and this podcast is basically just going to be Steelers news, my current thoughts on the team and the league, and just the other tomfoolery, whatever's on my mind or whatever's going on in the NFL or with the organization at the time. Just a little bit about me. I've been a Steelers fan damn near my whole life. I feel like my father would have kicked me out of the house otherwise. um, you know, uh, Very passionate about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Go to damn near every home game. Follow them during the off season. If there's one team in Major League Sports that I follow consistently, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. You could say, Muss, if there's one team you could follow for the rest of your life, it'd be Pittsburgh. I would give up the Penguins. I'd give up the Sixers. I'd give up the Phils. My sports allegiances are split down the middle of the state, and I just follow Pittsburgh. So I want to get into just kind of my general thoughts on the team now, the off season we had, and just go from there. So I guess where to start is the current state of the team and how the off season went. The end of the season was another disappointing end. 5 game losing streak, first round exit from the playoffs, just a total collapse. And then you kind of wonder, where's the team going to go from here? How's Tomlin going to respond? How's the organization going to respond? So the first thing they do is they clear out the quarterback room for the second time in 2 seasons. Russ goes, Fields goes, and the Steelers are kind of in limbo. Now, it came out recently that Tomlin knew that Rodgers was going to sign for a while, and that's why the Steelers never made any other big moves in the quarterback position once Fields and Russ went elsewhere. So you start, you have Aaron Rodgers. Then, well, I guess before you add DK Metcalf to a receiver room that was lacking last year. You could have said it was maybe the team's Achilles heel. You had George Pickens, but you had nobody else behind George Pickens. I mean, Calvin Austin did his thing, but he's a good slot receiver. There wasn't really another outside threat. You had Van Jefferson. They went outside Mike Williams. He does, a little bit, wins that game against the Redskins, you know. But other than that, the team really struggled. So the Steelers offseason, I guess to me, was a team that seemed to go 5 steps forward, but then take 5 steps immediately backwards. They go out, they sign DK Metcalf. So you're sitting there as a fan, man. Like, I'll never forget when the news broke. I'm at my buddy's bachelor party down in New Orleans. Obviously after we're 3/4 the way through the trip. I think it's the last night there. Basically, the vibes are down after, nights of partying. Everybody's, trying to recover and get themselves out, for the last night. And then the DK Metcalf news drops and the vibes in the apartment just completely changed. We went out and painted the town red that night. But you looked at a team, then you're like, wow, now this is a team that has DK Metcalf, has George Pickens. At the time, didn't have Rodgers yet, but the assumption was Rodgers was going to come under center, and you were just going to have this now high-powered offense, assuming the offensive line improved, and the running game improved behind Jalen Warren, and then Caleb Johnson in the draft as well. But then the Steelers go and trade George Pickens to the Dallas Cowboys, and now you're like, well, here you are in the very same position that you were last season. You have one good receiver on the outside and nobody else. Like I said, Calvin Austin's good, but I feel much more confident in Calvin Austin as your two on the inside in the middle of the field, or something else. But you need another perimeter receiver. And the Steelers don't have that. So and then the same thing. They sign Johnny Smith and Jalen Ramsey in that blockbuster trade to the Dolphins. But then they give up Minka Fitzpatrick. So they take, 5 steps forward in the secondary and then take 5 steps back, losing Minka. Now, that was my initial thought. Training camp has come and gone. The Steelers defense looks better than it has. So I say they did take 5 steps forward, even though losing Minka. And a player of that caliber, it seems like Jalen Ramsey and Darius Slay and even Juan Thornhill have all stepped up in the secondary. And all the reports out of camp, from what I've seen in preseason clips I've seen, this defense looks like a top 5 defense in the NFL. If not the top defense. And I'm not even trying to be biased. I mean, this defense looks good. It's going to be a problem. Um, so overall in the offseason, I kind of give I guess I give the moves a B at the end of the day if I had to give it a letter grade. Um, C plus if I'm being harsh, just because there's no solution to the wide receiver problem, and that really needs solved. But the defense looks out of this world. Aaron Rodgers, everything I've seen, and same thing, all the reports out of camp is his arm strength hasn't missed a beat. The dude can still sling it. There's the prettiest ball that you ever seen. Like, guy's good, and he hasn't lost it up here either. No matter what you think about the guy's political beliefs or his personal life, he still has a very high level of football IQ. All through camp, looking off defenders, drawing defenders off sides. On the snap count, just a very cerebral guy. And if his arm's not dust, which everything I've seen says it's not, and the only thing he's lost is his mobility, well, you're okay because the offensive line looks incredible. Broderick Jones was the guy I was going to talk about. Really struggled in the beginning of the camp, but at the end of camp, man, just strung together. Good practice after good practice after good practice. First preseason game last week. Played great. Played out of his mind. Troy Faltanu on the right side. Plays great. Looks like the first round pick you drafted him to be. Zach Frazier is your center. Had some snap issues in the beginning of camp, but looked get great in preseason. Mason McCormick really stepped up. And then you have Isaac Seumalo coming back from injury, and you're looking at a really good offensive line that's going to keep the pocket clean to protect Aaron Rodgers. Now, of course, again, you go through all that. It seems like all the drama is done. You get George Pickens out of there, which I think George will do good in Dallas. I think he just wanted to be on a team where he'd be very involved, a very progressive thinking offense. The Steelers are kind of a much more old school offense, grind the clock, run the ball, play tough defense, control the time of possession. And I think Pickens really went to be more of a, high flying offense, which the Cowboys have been over the past several seasons. So I think Pickens will be good there. But regardless, he was a distraction. And some of the things you hear from some of the beat reporters and on social media was it was much worse behind the scenes than it ever let out onto the field. But, wish the best of luck to George. I think he'll do well. But I say that because you have that drama, you remove that. Then you have the TJ Watt contract issue. And then that gets resolved. TJ gets his new contract, gets his bag, and then you're good. But now you're dealing with the elephant in the room, and that's the Cam Hayward contract situation. And Cam has come out and said he wants to be paid, he wants to be valued, he is willing to sit out games if his contract demands are not met, and it sucks because he could have done this at any other time. He could have done this when TJ was going through his thing, although I guess the TJ noise would have been loud enough to drown out his needs and concerns. But you could have done it afterwards. You could have done it any other time, but you're doing it now. Excuse me, at the end of training camp, getting ready to go into the season, and it's just like, damn, man! Like, finally thought we had all our ducks in a row. Finally thought we're going to avoid any drama or any conflicts going into the season. And now you have this, and I see both sides to the argument. You have a lot of Steelers fans, the Steeler Nation out there. Oh, Cam, you're greedy, you're ungrateful, you're egotistical, the whole nine. How much more money do you need? Da 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 da. I also see Cam Hayward's side of things. First off, he tells the Steelers, in his words, that last season, hey, I'm willing to take this team-friendly contract, which is why, people saying he's being greedy doesn't really add up to me. He took a very, very team-friendly deal last season. But then he also told the Steelers, when I have this all-pro season, when I go off this season in 2024, I'm going to come back to the negotiating table and want to be paid what I'm worth. The guy goes out, has an all-pro season, arguably the maybe number 2, number 3 defensive tackle in the NFL. And he wants to be paid like them. And I think, at the end of the day, 20, 25 million would do it, and the Steelers have the money to do so. They have the cap space. And you have to understand where Cam is coming from as well. He's older, which is kind of why the Steelers may not want to pay him, but he's older. He's not getting another big contract. This is Cam Hayward's last contract, and I believe it expires at the end of next season in 2026. Dude's gone. If he doesn't retire, the Steelers aren't going to resign. But Cam will likely retire. And he wants to get his money while he can get his money. And I know, I get it. Is he just a middle class American like anybody else listening to this? Oh man, dude, you're making millions of dollars. How much more money can you want? Stop being greedy. You're a millionaire. How much more do you need? Da 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 da. But you have to understand that pay in any aspect of life is relative, right? Like, if you are let's say you're a janitor, right? And the top performing janitors are getting paid $20 an hour, right? And you're a top performing janitor. You're sitting there, you're cleaning the floors, they're sparkling clean. If somebody dropped their food, they could pick it up and eat it right off the ground without any fear of getting sick. And you're getting paid $10 an hour. But then another janitor who does just as well the job as you do, and the other, let's say school district down the street, let's say the school janitors is getting paid 20, well, you're going to want to go and get paid $20 too. Same thing in the NFL. You're a top defensive tackle, you're performing like one, you want to be paid like one. You want to be paid relative to your profession and the performance that you're putting out in your job. So I get it. And I think Cam should get his money. The Steelers have the cap space because they don't have a franchise quarterback to pay. At minimum, hopefully for another 5 seasons. Hopefully next year's draft we go and get one. But I think Cam, should be paid at the end of the day. I'm Team Cam. I understand the Steelers side of things. I understand the fans that are saying he's too greedy. I get that perspective too. But at the end of the day, guy needs to get his bag while he can get his bag. Point blank. Period. So there's that. I guess the other thing in the preseason that sucks was the Will Howard injury. A lot of fans, myself included, were excited about seeing Will Howard, seeing what he could do, seeing if somehow, some way, he could prove that he was good enough to make the Steelers hold off on drafting a quarterback in next year's draft. But he goes down with the hand injury, looking like he might miss the entire preseason. Seems like there's a small glimmer of hope that he'll play the final game of the preseason. But overall, it's like the Will Howard era in Pittsburgh is done. And I don't mean like Will Howard's NFL career is done or even his career with the Pittsburgh Steelers is over. I just mean the hopes of seeing if he can be the quarterback of the future, barring a doomsday scenario like you saw in 2019, where Ben goes down, then Mason gets hurt, and then it's the Duck Hodges show. So outside of, Aaron, God forbid, going down for the season, Mason stepping in and getting hurt again, and having deja vu for Mason, and then Will Howard stepping in and playing significant amount of games for the Steelers. Unfortunately, guys just not going to get the opportunities to show what he can do at the NFL level in the Steelers uniform, at least this season. And by the time he can, it's likely going to be too late. It's going to be next season. Steelers are going to draft is in Pittsburgh. Steelers are going to go out. They're going to look and try and grab the franchise guy. But it is what it is. Wish the best to Will Howard, and hopefully we get to see him play some downs in this preseason. I guess the next thing we'll talk about, I'm trying to go through my notes here. This is my first podcast. Is the need at receiver. again. The Steelers need to go out, and if they are this serious about being an all-in football team this season, you can't do it with the current receiver core you have of DK Metcalf, who's a stud, right? DK is obviously your number one. He's your alpha in the offense. Um, Calvin Austin as your two, who's injured right now. He's banged up, hasn't practiced in over a week, I believe, at this point. So that's concerning. Roman Wilson, who had a good preseason, um, but hasn't had a good camp overall. And the vibes around him and Steelers camp doesn't seem like the Steelers are really confident in him being your number two or your number three wide receiver in the offense. And you figure if Calvin misses real football games, and it's Roman Wilson and Scotty Miller, who Scotty Miller has looked the Scotty Miller has looked to be the best wide receiver on the Steelers offense outside of DK Metcalf, you're gonna have a problem. DK, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller, Robert Woods, and then, maybe like a Ben Skoranek on special teams, which would have, guys like Rock Taylor and Max Hurlman on the outside looking in. It's a vicarious situation. But Mark Caboli, longtime Steelers beat writer Mark Caboli, dropped around noon today that the Pittsburgh Steelers in the next 10 to 12 days will be making a splash signing at wide receiver, which is something I didn't plan to talk about when I sat down to record this podcast. So, when asked, hey, are we talking about a Terry McLaurin, type deal, or like an Odell Beckham? When the interviewer, I forget who it was or what podcast, but Coboli, when Odell's name was brought up, was closer. Now, closer could mean a lot of things. The last uniform we saw Odell in was a Dolphins uniform. That could very well mean Odell Beckham Jr. is coming to the Pittsburgh Steelers, which OBJ doesn't really move the needle for me, like, at all. I don't think he makes you any better than what you have on the roster now. I don't think he's worth kicking one of these younger guys or somebody who's been here all camp off the roster to bring him in. Like, if this is OBJ, hell, even 5 years ago, he's a 33-year-old receiver, and he's my age, 33-year-old receiver right now. 5 years ago, I'd say, yeah, all in on bringing OBJ in and seeing what he can do. I think that's a difference maker. I think that can really put the Steelers over the hump. But OBJ at 33 hasn't really played meaningful downs or meaningful football since that Super Bowl run with the Rams. It doesn't really do it for me. I'd rather have, a Gabe Davis. Amari Cooper's kind of in the same boat of OBJ, but also kind of a better than nothing scenario. So, could it be OBJ? Is it maybe the most confident, even after OBJ said that he's had conversations with the Steelers? Yeah, it's probably likely where they're going to go, but call me crazy. I do think that closer, when mentioning OBJ and OBJ's last uniform being a Dolphins uniform, could also mean that the Steelers are in on Tyreek Hill. The vibes around Tyreek Hill in Miami are at an all-time low. It doesn't seem like he's happy to be there. Doesn't seem like the team is happy to have him around. Mike McDaniel seems fed up with him. Doesn't seem like he gets along with Tua very well. And the Steelers have shown they ain't afraid to take on a head case or two, man. I mean, OBJ, George Pickens, Martavis Bryant, like, they ain't afraid to take on a big personality. And Tyreek Hill, again, a little bit older, a little bit longer in the tooth, 31 years old, didn't have the best year last year, but he raises the bar and he raises the receiver room a shit ton compared to what you have now. Outside of DK Metcalf as well. And I would be for that. I would be for Tyreek Hill in the Steelers uniform. But the two guys I would like above, I guess if you had the tier, right? My number one tier would be these next two guys, and that's Terry McLaurin, who doesn't look like is going to get a deal done with the Commanders. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but he's obviously available. Terry McLaurin is obviously an option. I think he'd be a good option. Again, the Steelers can pay him. They have the money to pay him. Um, and I think he'd be a good fit. He's the best ability is availability, as they say in sports. And I don't believe Terry McLaurin has ever missed a football game since being in the NFL. Um, so he's durable. He's a great route runner. He's a good set of hands. Be very reliable. He'd be somebody that Aaron Rodgers can trust. Aaron Rodgers has always been a big trust guy with his receivers, which is more than can be said about any receiver outside of DK Metcalf on the Steelers roster right now. And the second guy, who I don't see why, outside of the asking price being way, way too much for the Steelers to afford, and I don't even mean monetarily, I mean draft capital wise, it's Chris Olave from the New Orleans Saints. The Saints have no reason, absolutely no reason, to hold on to Chris Olave. Uh, the Saints are going to be very likely going to be the worst team in football this year. You have a quarterback room of Spencer Rattler, Tyler Shuck, and Jake Haener. Your other offensive weapon is an over-the-hill Alvin Kamara, who was amazing back in his heyday, but has lost step, is only getting older. You're pretty much in full rebuild mode. There's no franchise pieces on the Saints outside of maybe Chris Olave, but Chris Olave is not going to help you if you don't have a good enough quarterback to throw him the football. And I'm sure Omar Khan and the Steelers have picked up the phone to call both Washington and New Orleans to check in on Terry McLaurin and Chris Olave, respectively. But I would love, those are my tier one guys by far. I would love to have one of those guys. Next in line would probably be Tyreek Hill. Would probably be like the tier two type of guy. And we kind of talked about him. I think if anybody could keep a cap on his big personality or whatever drama he may bring to the team, it's Mike Tomlin, as he's proved time and time again. And then you kind of get down into the next tier, which you would put in between Tyreek Hill and then I guess your OBJs, Amari Coopers of the world, and that's a guy like Romeo Dobbs from the Green Bay Packers. Now I know Dobbs, he just got hurt at camp yesterday, I believe it was. So that's a bit concerning, but he would be a guy I think Green Bay would be a great trade partner. Um, with the addition of Emeka Egbuka to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Jalen McMillan is a very interesting name. A guy who really came on last season with injuries to Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Younger guy, flashed a lot of potential, could be in a Steelers uniform for a long time. I think he'd be, an awesome trade target. The Steelers haven't picked up the phone and called Tampa Bay, and I believe the Steelers and Tampa Bay are having joint practices this week too. That could give them a very good look at guys on that team who'd fit into that system. I guess Trey Palmer is another guy on that team, but Jalen McMillan would be the guy that I want from Tampa Bay. And then the second guy in this tier would be, your Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis is better than what you have now, but I feel like his skill set is too similar to DK Metcalf, and it's a downgrade from DK Metcalf. So I don't know how much it moves the needle. It moves the needle more than the Steelers have now, but um, not sure if that really gets you to the all-in Super Bowl hump, like guys like Terry McLaurin or Chris Olave would, and possibly a Romeo Dobbs and Jalen McMillan. Um, and then you go down to your Amari Coopers and your OBJs of the world, which I don't necessarily think make the receiver group any better than it is now by a lot. Um, you're talking about old guys with reliable sets of hands, and that's already Robert Woods. Like Robert Woods is already on the roster. You already have that guy. So I don't know how much the addition of an Amari Cooper or an OBJ really raised the needle. But we'll see. My crazy take is that it's going to be Tyreek. My reading in between the lines of when Mark Boley said warmer when OBJ's name was brought up is that it's Tyreek Hill. Because it's not going to be Jalen Waddle. I feel like the Dolphins, unless they're really going to get a haul from the Steelers and bail on the season, would give up Jalen Waddle instead of Tyreek Hill when you're not having the issues and the problems with Jalen Waddle that Tyreek Hill is bringing to the team. Uh, so at the end of the day, I think that kind of wraps it up for a first podcast. Appreciate the one or two people in the world that are going to listen to this. I guess the closing thing that I would say is we'll do like record prediction for the Steelers this year. Um, the Pittsburgh Steelers, with the team they have now and with the receiver they're going to sign in the future. Uh, we'll rewind it a bit. Another guy that I'd like to see in a Steelers uniform is Jalen Tolbert. I think he should have been somebody that came over from Dallas in the Pickens trade, who flashed some good potential. We'll put him in that Jalen McMillan, Romeo Dobbs tier. But anywho, the Steelers' record for the season, I think their floor, if everything falls apart, not falls apart, but if they don't do so well, is 9-8. That's just Mike Tomlin football. He just doesn't let his team have losing records. And even if the Steelers, you're going into the end of the season and the Steelers are, 6-6, we'll say it. He'll find a way to get that team to 9-8. He'll find a way to go 3-2 to close out the season. 9-8 probably is missing the playoffs. Probably don't make the playoffs that year or this year, and then you regroup and move on, looking for next year and looking for your franchise quarterback for the future. I think the ceiling, I would probably say, is 11-6, maybe 12-5. 12-5 maybe wins you the division, right? That maybe, if you have a good divisional record, you beat the teams you're supposed to beat, and you get a leg up on the Ravens. That could be enough. You might not need 13 wins to win the AFC North this year, because I do think it's going to be the Steelers and the Ravens fighting for the top of the division. The Browns have bad quarterback situation. You have the veteran Joe Flacco, but he's old, and how much left does he really have in the tank? And then a mishmatch of quarterbacks behind them. I mean, Dylan Gabriel, Kenny Pickett, Shedeur Sanders, and Deshaun Watson's not even going to play. But, you figure Flacco will start. Looking like right now, or at least through camp, it was looking like Pickett or Gabriel was going to be the two, and then Shedeur was going to be on the practice squad. Now with Gabriel being hurt, Kenny being hurt, and Shedeur getting playing time, maybe Shedeur's your two or your emergency quarterback, and then Kenny or Gabriel end up on the practice squad or cut. But there's a lot the Cleveland Browns have to figure out, and they're probably my basement team in the division again. Then you have the Cincinnati Bengals, who have an amazing high-powered offense. Elite quarterback in Joe Burrow, elite wide receiver 1 in Jamar Chase, great wide receiver 2 in T. Higgins, Mike Gesicki and now Noah Fant as your tight ends, Chase Brown in the backfield. They have high-powered weapons. The problem is their defense is absolute dog water. It's going to be one of the worst defenses in the NFL. And when they run up to teams, especially teams in their own division, and after I just got done shitting on the Cleveland Browns, the one thing I will say is they have a good defense. They will have a good defense. And then you have Baltimore and Pittsburgh, who will be, in your top 5, top 3 likely defenses in the NFL. You got to play 6 games against tough defenses. And eventually they're going to put a cap on your offense enough that you're just not going to be able to run teams like that out of the stadium like you may other competition in the NFL. So that's going to have the Bengals at my 3. And then, the Steelers and the Ravens fighting for the number 1. Right now, I give the lean to Baltimore. I think Baltimore will likely be the winners of the division, as much as that pains me to say. But being realistic here, and then Pittsburgh will, sneak in a wild card spot there. But I think the Steelers can win, especially if they get a good wide receiver signing. I think the Steelers' absolute ceiling is maybe 13-4 if they get a Terry McLaurin or Chris Olave. If they don't get one of those two names, I'm still sticking with my 11-6, 12-5, assuming they're division winners, and then 9-8. But all right, guys, I think that's it for today. Like and subscribe or whatever you got to do to get the YouTube algorithm, or these other podcast algorithms. I guess it's commenting, um, whether it's a positive comment or you want to troll me in the comments because you're one of my buddies or you just don't like the look of my face or my voice or you're a Steelers hater or whatever. All interaction is good interaction. But thank you guys. Looking forward to put out a new episode. I don't know how frequently I'm going to do these, if I'm going to do them once a week, multiple times a week. I'd say at least once a week. But we'll go from there. We'll go as news drops. Maybe I'll do, shorter ones for breaking news and then longer ones, like after games and stuff like that going into the season. But all right. Thank y'all. Love y'all. Have a good day.